welcome to Jay Coletti's Racket Reviews. My name is Jay Coletti, and I will be your hostess. Here on Racket Reviews, we are dedicated to learning about all things organized crime, and I'm very excited to wrap up our conversation today about the Colombo family by covering Carmine Persico's reign. I know it's a bit odd for us to just be covering one boss for a full episode, but let me tell you, there's plenty to get to. Make sure that you are watching all the previous episodes and you've watched part 1 of this video. So sit back, relax, grab a snack, and enjoy. Let's jump right into it. Carmine John Persico Jr. was born on August 8, 1933 in Brooklyn, New York. His father was a stenographer for multiple law firms in Manhattan, and his brothers Theodore and Alphonse Persico also became capos in the Colombo family. Persico dropped out of high school at 16 in 1950. He was the leader of the Garfield Boys' Brooklyn gang. Other sources say in 1950 he was a member of the Garfield Boys' successor gang. In March of 1951, Persico was arrested on charges of beating a boy to death in Prospect Park in Brooklyn, but the charges were dropped. It was around this time that Persico was recruited to the Profaci, now Colombo, crime family by Frank Abitamarco. Persico did bookmaking and loan sharking, then later took on burglaries and hijacking. He would be arrested over a dozen times in the 1950s, but would only spend a few days in jail. He would also begin working with the Gallo brothers. One theory is that Persico and the Gallo brothers were the gunmen in the Albert Anastasia murder. Essentially, Anastasia's underboss, Carlo Gambino, made a successful power play for the family headship and conspired with Vito Genovese and Joe Profaci to get Anastasia out of the way. It's possible that Profaci gave this contract to the Gallo brothers and Persico. Persico also worked closely with the Gallo brothers during the First Colombo War, wherein there was a refusal to pay Profaci's taxes by several of his men, especially Abitamarco. This started a bloody conflict that ended up with Abitamarco being killed, possibly after Joe Gallo accepted a contract by Profaci to have Abitamarco killed in exchange for his illegal lottery racket. If that was the deal, Profaci did not hold up his end of the bargain. The Gallo brothers, led by Joe Gallo, then kidnapped Profaci's top men. Profaci's consigliere negotiated a peace, but once more, Profaci did not honor his agreement. He had one of Gallo's gunmen killed, and attempted to have Larry Gallo strangled to death. Persico, who had switched alignments, very likely due to the fact that Joe Gallo may have taken the contract to kill Persico's mentor Frank Abitamarco, attempted to strangle Larry Gallo, but the police intervened. Because of this betrayal, the Gallo brothers began calling Persico the Snake, and the nickname stuck. Persico was indicted for this crime, but never charged, as Larry Gallo refused to testify. Even after Profaci had died of cancer in 1962, this war continued. In 1963, Persico survived a car bombing. On May 19, 1963, Persico was ambushed. A panel truck filled with Gallo gunmen pulled alongside his car and shot him multiple times in the face, hand, and shoulder. Persico survived this, and gangland lore holds that Persico actually spit out the bullet that went through his face. Soon after the shooting, Persico was in prison for extortion charges. This conflict ended later that year, in autumn of 1963, when Gallo was imprisoned. Persico was in prison for only a short time, and when he was released, was promoted to capo of the Colombo family. Persico was very hands-on. He was in the streets himself with his businesses in labor racketeering, extortion, loan sharking, hijacking, illegal gambling, and murder for hire. Persico's crew was among the Colombo family's most prosperous factions. From 1960 to 1968, Persico would be subjected to 5 separate trials for hijacking. Finally, he was convicted in 1968 and sent to prison on January 27, 1972, where he would serve 8 years. In 1971, Joe Gallo would be released from prison, and Jerome Johnson would paralyze Joe Colombo by shooting him at the 2nd annual Italian Unity Day celebration and start the Second Colombo War. During this time, Persico was on trial again. On November 11, 1971, he went on trial for 37 counts of extortion, usury, coercion, and conspiracy from the loan sharking operation he ran in a Manhattan fur shop. He was acquitted for all charges on December 8th of that year, when all 12 of the witnesses said they could not identify Persico. On April 7th, 1972, Joe Gallo was taken out during his birthday celebration at Umberto's Clam House in Little Italy. Carmine Persico was serving his 8 years in 1973. He pushed Joseph Brancato, who was the acting boss at the time of Joseph Colombo's death, aside and became boss himself. There is some dispute about the headship of the Colombo family at this time, but according to the New York Times, Thomas DiBella was a transitional boss of the family during this time, 1973 to 1977. DiBella caused many issues for the family, particularly with his favoritism and partiality toward the Persico faction and his inability to keep the Gambino family from encroaching on their territories. Persico's crew became extremely powerful, even pushing out other family factions. Because of this, it is widely believed that Persico was really the one pulling DiBella's strings, making Persico the boss and DiBella the acting boss from 1973 until he was forced to retire due to poor health in 1977 when he was 74 years old. After DiBella's retirement, the exact details are still a little bit fuzzy. It would seem that Alphonse Persico, Carmine Persico's brother, would take over as acting boss sometime between 1977 and 1981. For clarity's sake, let's stick with the 1977 date. Alphonse Persico was placed into the acting boss position, with Gennaro Langella placed as his underboss. Theodore, Carmine Persico's other brother, was placed in a high position as well, presumably a consigliere type of position, to assist Alphonse. Carmine Persico was briefly out of prison from 1979 to 1981. On August 11, 1981, however, Carmine Persico pled guilty to attempting to bribe the IRS while in federal custody in 1977 and 1978, when a recording was revealed of him offering an agent $250,000 if he would get him an early release from prison. On November 9, Carmine Persico was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. In 1981, Carmine Persico's son, also named Alphonse and nicknamed Little Alley Boy, was arrested for heroin charges, but the charges were dropped. Alphonse Persico's underboss and essentially co-acting boss Gennaro Langella would step officially into the acting boss role in 1983. Langella had been supervising some of the bigger family rackets, including the family's stake in the Concrete Club, and had taken control of the family's cement and concrete workers union. Selwyn Rayab described Langella as a ruthless, arrogant loan shark and drug trafficker. His speech was peppered with expletives. He favored double-breasted blazers, sporty open-collar shirts, and wraparound sunglasses. Gennaro Langella was the official acting boss for a year from 1983 to 1984 until he and several other Colombo members were indicted in the Colombo trials on RICO charges on October 14, 1984. Then, on February 25, 1985, Langella and several other mafiosi leaders were indicted in the Mafia Commission trial. The Colombo trial saw the conviction of Carmine Persico and 8 others for, according to the New York Times, operating the Colombo crime family in a widespread pattern of labor racketeering in New York City. Major parts of the case focused on charges that the Colombo group controlled several unions, primarily the District Council of the Cement and Concrete Workers, and extorted millions of dollars from construction companies in the city. Langella was sentenced to 10 years in prison for perjury and obstruction of justice. From the Colombo trial, he received 65 years in prison, and from the Mafia Commission trial, received 100 years in prison. In addition to all of this, he was also charged a total of $255,000. Carmine Persico had gone into hiding at the home of his cousin, Fred DeChristopher. DeChristopher had already turned informant and made the FBI aware of his cousin's whereabouts and crimes. The FBI staged a manhunt to cover for DeChristopher, but during the Colombo trials, DeChristopher acted as one of the star witnesses. From the Colombo trials, Carmine Persico was sentenced to 39 years in prison, and from the Mafia Commission trials, he received 100 years in prison and a $240,000 fine. Late in 1986, Carmine Persico and John Gotti supported a plan to kill lead prosecutor Rudy Giuliani, but the hit was rejected by the commission. During all of these arrests and sentences, Anthony Scarpati took over as acting boss of the Colombo family. Anthony Scarpati, or Scappy, as he was called, was the Colombo capo who took over as acting boss for 2 years before he was also incarcerated. Scarpati was most famous for his time with the South Brooklyn Boys, where, at age 16, he had been arrested for fatally shooting a youth in a rival gang similar to Carmine Persico in that way. It was after Scarpati that we see Vittorio Little Vic Arena step into the role of acting boss. Following Scappy's incarceration, Persico named Victor Arena acting boss of the family. Arena had been a loyal Brooklyn capo prior to his promotion. This promotion would wind up being a disaster. Arena expanded the family interest and also expanded his reputation with several of Persico's Brooklyn capos. In November of 1989, Arena ordered the murder of Thomas Osera, who was believed to be skimming off the family's profits, allowed several law enforcement officers to get their hands on the family's loan sharking records, and had killed a John Gotti associate. On November 13, 1989, Osera was strangled with a piano wire by Gregory Scarpa, a Colombo enforcer who later turned FBI informant with some of Arena's other men when Arena made a hard stance against drug trafficking, including Arena's own consigliere, Carmine Sessa. In 1991, Arena began to feel that the family would be better off and make more money if he were to become the official boss, and Persico were left out of it. This feeling intensified when it came out that Persico was in talks to make a television biography. After Joe Bonanno's tell-all book had resulted in such a disaster in the Mafia Commission trial, Arena decided to act. This would be the start of the third Colombo War. Arena went to the commission first and asked that they recognize him as the official boss. They declined to make a decision. They advised Arena to follow tradition and ask the capos if they preferred him or Persico. Arena did as he was told. He asked Carmine Sessa to take a poll of the capos about who they preferred, but instead of following Arena's instructions, Sessa told Persico. Persico ordered a hit on Arena. On June 20th, 1991, a group of 5 men, including Hank Smura and Carmine Sessa, who must have been the least enthusiastic consigliere in the history of the 5 families, waited in a parked car to shoot Arena. When Arena drove up and saw the 5 men in the car, he knew what was going on. He drove away, and the men were unable to take their shot. The third Colombo War was between Arena's and and Persico's loyalists. The family was in civil war during this time, so the leadership of Persico loyalists is unclear. Although Persico's son, who was being groomed to take over the family anyway, was a major player leading the campaign against Arena. Alphonse Little Alley Boy Persico was behind bars himself at this time as well. On November 18, 1991, Arena sent a team to kill Gregory Scarpa. Scarpa was a staunch Persico loyalist and, as was later revealed in 1995, an FBI informant. Scarpa had been driving behind his daughter and grandchild when two cars with gunmen pulled in front of him and began shooting. Scarpa was able to drive away and survive the encounter. His daughter and grandchild also made it out of harm's way. Hank Smura, Persico loyalist and one of the hitmen who had attempted to kill Arena in June, was shot. Several days later, on November 29th, an attempt was made on Cessa's life while he was driving, but he escaped. All of these murders, attempted murders, and back and forth fighting drew a lot of media attention. On December 16, 1991, Arena and others were summoned to a grand jury meeting to testify about the conflict, but all of the men refused to testify. In 1992, Arena was indicted for murder and racketeering, but went into hiding at the house his girlfriend was having built in Valley Stream, New York. When the FBI arrested Arena at that house, they found illegal weapons, ammunition, and a bulletproof vest. Arena was convicted on December 22, 1992, of racketeering and the Osera murder. Arena was sentenced to 3 life sentences plus 85 years in federal prison. The Third Colombo War went on for a total of 7 months, resulting in the death of 12 people, including 3 innocent bystanders, and the disappearance of 18 associates. Carmine Persico maintained control of his family. Persico would then place his first cousin and longtime capo, Andrew Russo, into the role of acting boss. Russo had been a family capo for 17 years and was just released from prison on July 29, 1994 after serving 10 years for racketeering and loan sharking. Alphonse Persico was released from jail soon after Russo, but since his parole lasted until 1997, he kept a low profile, working at a limousine service in Brooklyn called Romantic Limousines until he could take over as boss. His cousin Andrew Russo would work hard negotiating peace deals with the remaining Arena loyalists and building back family stability with the other New York families. This was all going well, but Russo got into some trouble when he started mixing business with pleasure. At a Christmas party in 1994, Russo met Dorothy Suffel and fell head over heels for her. Sure, Russo was married, but so was Suffel. Besides, it was almost expected that mafiosi have a mistress on the side. The term gumar or guma being used to describe a mobster mistress was popularized in the HBO series The Sopranos. This is the Americanized version of the Italian word comare, meaning second mother, or perhaps more appropriately, another woman who takes care of you. One thing was for certain, women were never supposed to be involved in Cosa Nostra business, but by the mid-1990s, this code was beginning to crack. Yay, feminism? Russo would take Suffel to plays and fancy dinners, and eventually persuaded her, a lawyer who did not need clearance to talk with prison inmates, to pass messages along to his son, who was behind bars at this time. She would later be involved in jury tampering for his son's murder trial, more on this in a moment. Their affair ended, but in her time visiting mobsters in jail, she met Lawrence Fiorenza, who had been convicted with Russo's son for racketeering. Lawrence and Dorothy Fiorenza were married in April 1996. 1996 was really not Russo's year. He was arrested for illegally controlling Long Island's waste management industry. While on trial in 1997 for money laundering, fraud, and bribery, Dorothy Fiorenza took the witness stand against Russo for jury tampering on his son's behalf. In exchange, the FBI gave her husband Lawrence Fiorenza, who was dying of AIDS and cirrhosis of the liver, a safe life in witness protection. Dorothy Fiorenza would later try unsuccessfully to get her law degree back. Now let's get back to the Persicos. Following Russo's 1996 arrest, Alphonse Persico would take over as acting boss. Carmine Persico's son, Alphonse Little Alley Boy Persico, was born in New York City in 1954. Alphonse Persico was a good student and graduated high school and was then accepted into St. John's University, a private Catholic university in New York. He would drop out his sophomore year to work with his father in crime. A capo by his mid-20s, Persico was clearly being groomed by his father to take over the family business. Alphonse Persico was convicted alongside his father in the Colombo trial and sentenced to 12 years in federal prison on November 17, 1986. I think it's fair to say that the knowledge that Alphonse Persico was being groomed to take over the role of boss and Arena was simply a transitional figure added to Arena's bitterness and might have been part of the reason why we see that Third Colombo War. Alphonse Persico directed the campaign against Arena. Alphonse and other Colombo family members were indicted on racketeering and the 1992 murders of Arena loyalists on May 13, 1993. It was also in 1993 that Alphonse Persico's wife divorced him. The relationship with his ex-wife becomes interesting a little later on. These mafia women, I'm telling you, they're nothing but trouble. On August 8, 1994, Alphonse Persico was acquitted and was released released from prison that year. He did not jump into family headship at this time, as mentioned before, but after Russo was in prison in 1996, Alphonse Persico took on the role of acting boss. In 1999, Alphonse Persico was in a speedboat when he was stopped by the Coast Guard in the Florida Keys. When the speedboat was searched, the Coast Guardsmen found a shotgun and semi-automatic weapon. Persico was arrested as a felon. In May of 1999, Alphonse Persico, or perhaps his father Carmine, ordered a hit on the newly appointed Colombo underboss William Cotolo. Cotolo had been a supporter of Arena back in 1991, but it is more likely that Alphonse Persico knew that if he went away as a felon, that Cotolo would make a move to take over the family. After all, that is what Arena did. On May 26, 1999, Alphonse Persico had summoned Cotolo to meet him in the Bay Ridge section of Brooklyn. Later that day, Cotolo's wife reported him missing. When Cotolo had arrived to meet Persico, he was taken instead by Colombo hitmen Thomas Gioli, Dino Calabro, and Dino Saracino to Saracino's apartment, where Cotolo was murdered. Persico was convicted in 2000 for the weapons charge and sentenced to 18 months in prison. On January 24, 2001, Persico was set to be released for the weapons charge, but this had given the authorities the time to build a case against him and was transported to New York, where he was indicted for loan sharking. Persico would be held without bail, as the authorities also built a case against him for the Cotolo murder, which they rightly believed he had something to do with. On December 20th, 2001, Persico pled guilty to loan sharking, money laundering, and federal racketeering. He was sentenced to 13 years in prison and, as part of the plea deal, had to confess that he had been the Colombo family's acting boss. On October 14th, 2004, Persico was indicted for the Cotolo murder. However, it was declared a mistrial as Cotolo's wife had lied under oath. On December 28th, 2007, Persico was convicted of murder pertaining to racketeering and witness tampering, and on February 7th, 2008, was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. In 2010, Andrew Russo took over once again as acting boss while Persico was imprisoned, but he was then in prison from 2011 to 2013. It didn't end there, though. I told you Persico's ex-wife would come back into play. In February 2010, a Colombo hitman said that Persico had ordered the shooting of Staten Island nightclub owner Michael Devine in 1992. During this time, Devine was dating Mrs. Persico. In 1992, Persico and his wife were separated, not divorced. Carmine Persico died on March 7th, 2019 at the age of 85 from complications arising from diabetes. It would seem that Alphonse Persico, Carmine's son, is the official boss today, but the current Colombo family headship is unknown. Carmine Persico was buried in Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Racket Reviews, wrapping up our discussion about the Colombo crime family. Carmine Persico had quite the ride as boss, and I hope that you've had as much fun watching this as I've had researching it. There's so much more that we need to discuss, but that's for another day. Make sure to like, subscribe, and click notifications to get more Mafia content sent directly to your sub box. Ciao.